The Acid Left is a project run by cultural theorist and curator Mike Watson and artist Adam Ray Adkins at the intersection of politics and aesthetics, centering the power of the creative spirit and the need for people to take an active role in determining how production is organized. We welcome you to turn on, tune in, and shape a future collective reality. Inspired by memes, YouTubers, Twitch, as well as the work of the Frankfurt School and the DIY approach of the beatnik punk eras, we aim to forge a melding of abstraction, psychedelia, and internet aesthetics with leftist political organization. Join the Acid Left for a trip at the intersection of art, thought, and materialism.
And we're today broadcasting on YouTube a conversation we had earlier with Randonautica app founder Joshua Lengfelder about the kind of intention behind the app and its kind of uses in breaking us out of our daily routine and heading on basically a situationist dérive, as that's what he kind of developed the app for. So thanks for coming along for the ride. Do check out the Randonautica app, and remember that we have a Twitch now, twitch.tv/the Acid Left. Hope to see you there.
So, like I said, I have used the app. It's very fun. There's a short video on our YouTube where I kind of review my first experience with it, and it's really easy to use. You know, you just like set your intention, your location, click it, and you follow it and go there and explore. But before we really like talk about that aspect of it, I had some questions about like its development, you know? So it's built on a bot created by the Fatum project, and its coordinates are produced by a quantum random number generator. And I was wondering, Joshua, if you could tell us like how exactly quantum numbers are generated, you know, like a very like hardware type question, I guess. And if there's anything else you'd want to explain about the Fatum project.
Yeah, that's great. The Fatum project started off as just a very simple research project. Just a couple of guys who basically started sending people random coordinates on ICQ Messenger. This was a long time ago. And so people would get these random coordinates and start experiencing just sort of weird effects. And so they would basically send out these random coordinates. So you just get a message with a random coordinate. And even years later, people were reporting that just strange things were happening at these random places. So they started going, maybe there's something interesting here. And so diving into this research, they ended up learning about the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab and these ideas that consciousness can actually influence randomness and possibly do some funky things with consciousness where just the act of generating a random point could be influenced by someone's consciousness, and like some weird things could happen. So the development started with just using pseudo randomness and eventually moved to using a quantum random number generator because the quantum source is the more responsive of the two. So pseudo randomness, generally, we don't think that you can influence it too much, but quantum randomness has the possibility for responsiveness. So we use a quantum random number generator in Australia National University, which basically measures the fluctuation of a photon bouncing off of a mirror. And that's basically how the randomness is generated. There's other ways of doing it, like electron tunneling. You can use a Geiger counter and measure a radioactive source. And but we use the one at Australia National University because it's a very like legit system set up and in like this academic environment, and so it's really trustworthy and people, you know, trust it. So that's why we went with that one. It's not the most responsive. There's other technology that's more responsive that we've done experiments with, but that's what we're using right now.
Okay,
can I just ask a question? Sorry, Adam, to come in there, but as it's still kind of topical part of the conversation, Joshua. So if you generate a number randomly and you focus on something in your mind, like could be something you're hoping for, could be a question, are you saying that the randomness of the generation can lead somehow you to affect reality. So basically you're generating a random location, so a random set of coordinates, and specifically because you do it genuinely randomly, do you think that means that the random location can be affected by your mind more than if it wasn't truly random?
Yes, yes, definitely. You get weirder results using a quantum source than a pseudo-random source. Definitely. We've done tests, like blind tests, where we switched everything to the pseudo-randomness, and we still got some interesting results. But definitely when we use the mind-machine interaction algorithm, which basically places a lot of random points and then measures where they statistically cluster to a statistically improbable degree, that's where it's hypothesized at that point has been influenced by consciousness. So basically we're taking like 10,000 random points and measuring where they cluster. And then we're hypothesizing that that improbable cluster of points is pointing you towards somewhere that could be hypothetically meaningful or just coincidental. People have had really interesting experiences. I particularly had a bunch of weird experiences where you are like, it doesn't even have to be conscious. Like you don't even have to be consciously thinking, okay, I want to go find a red door, and then you influence the probability and find a red door. You can use it that way, but it can also just pick up on things that you were talking about or thinking about. So a lot of times people will find things at the point that they were talking about or thinking about while they were generating it.
And
okay, but that is kind of, sorry, Adam Mickens, but that is kind of spooky. I'll let you ask a question immediately afterwards, but I'm just thinking that is kind of spooky, no? That I would find that a little bit spooky, but I have had like loads of spooky coincidences anyway happen at different points in my life. Like, you know, suddenly lots of kind of stuff happens. So this is like classic Jungian stuff, that this can happen and then you can kind of discount it, but sometimes you need to make sense of it. So this is where Jung comes in with synchronicity, which is something that you talk about in relation to your app. Synchronicity basically means kind of meaningful coincidences. So they're coincidences, but they may also have a meaning relevant to your life, which you may also want to call spiritual. You know, one may also want to call spiritual. You know, but lots of people kind of do find that scary, you know, that kind of thing.
Well, just the act of going to an unknown place. Don't even have to think about coincidences or synchronicity or quantumness or whatever. Just the act of going somewhere where you don't know what is there. Your body immediately has a survival response that goes, do not go there because it's unknown. And your body is like wanting to protect you. So that's one of the things that we're trying to like push, is that there's novelty to be found out there, and it's going to be interesting and cool, because scanning for anomalies, generally you're scanning for threats. And so this has always been the case since day one, is just the act of going to a random place that's unknown strikes fear into the heart of a lot of people. And so like just the prospect of like going to somewhere you don't know about can be a scary thing. And then you introduce in all these coincidences, and that does kind of like send a chill up your spine when maybe you were thinking or talking about something and then you go to the point and it's there. I can see how that is a very spooky kind of coincidence and experience.
Joshua, have you ever seen the movie The 13th Floor?
I have not, no.
So, you know, it's obviously a movie and it's fiction, so it's embellished a little bit, but it's kind of similar to what you're saying there. At one point, a person gets told to pick somewhere that they have no desire to go to, far away, and drive there. And they drive there and they end up finding out, like, you know, the simulation stops being real. They enter a computer grid. But in a more realistic level, or a more everyday level, rather, you know, when we go to those places outside of our normal perception, yeah, part of our simulation of how we perceive reality is challenged. We experience glitches because we don't have the whole picture.
Right.
But I wanted to ask if, and maybe this is a silly distinction, but if it's really reality that is influenced, or the like the location, or the machine itself, the quantum read there. And is that related to the pair project that you mentioned earlier, and their like mind-machine interaction?
Yeah. So the pair project actually did experiments where they would have people remote view random locations. And they actually did show that some people were capable of like picking up on, with their imagination and their consciousness, they would just generate a random point and then ask people to tell them what was there. And they actually did find that some people could remote view these random locations and see what was there. And so we kind of put these two things together, and this idea that you can influence this random number generator. And so technically what Randonautica is a practical remote viewing application. And so the randomness is acting as a biofeedback device where your consciousness is going, okay, this might be interesting here. And you're remotely viewing that location as a potentially interesting geographic location. So like technically it's a remote viewing application.
That's interesting. That actually makes me think a little bit. I used to do this project with people. I do like automatic art creation, and sometimes people would talk with me, but sometimes they wouldn't feel comfortable like that. So they would I'd be like, just look at me for 5 minutes, and I would kind of go into that mode and draw something very abstract and show it to them. And almost always they would find something really meaningful in it. Like, oh my God, this makes me think of this time in my childhood. Or if they were talking and I drew stuff, they'd be like, oh, wow, yeah, you know, that makes me think there was also this thing that happened that same day. So there does seem to be some kind of spooky connection there.
Yeah, well, yeah, the mind has this, we call this the void meme, where you go somewhere that's completely devoid of any kind of meaning, and your mind starts filling in the blanks and creating meaning where there is none. So that's going to happen whether you throw a dart at a dartboard or just go walk in a straight line across your city. If you start looking in an information-rich environment, you're going to find these collisions of information because reality is so complex and so information-filled. What we're really looking at is these really mind-bending experiences where, like, for instance, I went out with my friend and we were just talking about giant skeletons. And it took us, the random point was at the edge of a lake. And we go to the edge of a lake and there's a guy meditating there. And so I asked him, I said, have you ever heard of this research of meditators influencing quantum randomness? He said, yes, I have. And then he points over to the other end of the lake and he goes, you see that rock wall over there? Well, apparently there's giant skeletons buried in that rock wall. So these are the kind of weird coincidences. Like, we were just talking about giant skeletons and we find this guy meditating who tells us about giant skeletons. That is just like kind of unexplainable. And there's no really an answer there. There's just mystery. But that is what kind of makes it fun and like interesting.
Right. Yeah, I could imagine, because I would imagine that would have sparked, you know, really interesting conversation afterwards between you and your friend.
Yeah.
You know, whether or not there were giant skeletons in that rock face, whether, you know, all sorts of stuff. If the meditation aspect is there, you know, you could even argue that kind of retroactively went back and was one of the reasons you were talking about giant skeletons, you know,
right?
If there's that synchronicity there. That's the wrong word.
Right.
Well, could you tell us actually your favorite randonauting story that you've done using the app?
Well, I have quite a few. Well, one of them that was really interesting was I went to Colorado Springs and I just went and I drove into Colorado Springs and I go, okay, the first thing I'm going to do is go to a random point to figure out what I'm going to do here in this city. And it takes me to this bar called the Burrowing Owl. And at the time, our logo was actually a burrowing owl. And so I walk in, I'm like, this is where I'm going to get my message. And well, I walk in and the bartenders are just like drinking behind the bar and we all take a shot to Randonautica. And this woman that's there starts telling me about these like healing vortexes and like telling me basically what I should do with my trip in Colorado Springs. I ended up coming back to Colorado this year and went to some of these vortexes that she told me about and ended up seeing a UFO at one of these places. So that's just like, it never would have happened if I hadn't gone randonauting, that I would have seen this UFO, but that even happened a year later. So it's like these kind of reality shifts can happen even way down the line just because you deviated from your normal routine. These like kind of effects can kind of snowball and just change your experience from what it would have been even years down the line. And so this is what we call the stasis field. We don't really call it the simulation, because for this experiment, we assume reality is real. And we call the complex web of causal events that your normal routine is, that we call that the stasis field. And that by injecting randomness into your normal routine, you can deviate from your probability path that keeps you locked into a certain amount of choices and a certain amount of potential possibilities. And when you inject randomness, you can inject novelty. And so you're starting to think about things you never would have thought about. You're starting to experience things you never would have experienced. You're literally learning more about your everyday environment. And so you're literally like on a path of wisdom, which is why our logo is the owl, because the owl sees in the dark. And that's basically what a randonaut is doing, is learning what they don't know and seeing in the dark.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism around owls. And I think I really like the way that you explained that there at the not simulation, because it ties a certain materiality to it that I think is important for like actually exploring the world and the self. But so that made me think, you brought that up about Debord and the Dérive.
Yes.
So in 1956, he talked about wandering through streets of Paris or other cities with like small groups of people. And, they're like to break themselves out of their everyday routines, that you get stuck in these like work, home, maybe this bar kind of like loops, when you're stuck and your reality becomes that. And so by like actually following the city with friends and getting lost in a way, but also allowing the city itself to speak to you and like get, certain landmarks are going to pull you in different ways that you can really kind of uncover the unconscious of the city. So is Debord, the Situationist, inspirational to your project at all?
Hugely. I mean, and largely based on the Dérive. That this idea that you can find blind spots, and so that the city has its normal ebb and flow where people go throughout their routine, and then there could be hidden places where people rarely go, and where kind of strange things kind of accumulate in these hidden zones, because that's like where only things that happen outside of routine kind of attract there or kind of aggregate there. And so you can kind of find these like weird little spots that are like hidden. Definitely so. Guy Debord is like a huge influence on this project. And another thing about the Situationists is the situation. And so that you're putting yourself in this situation that you've never been in, and you likely would not have been in before. And so it's like you're definitely opening yourself up to something different in your everyday life.
Yeah.
I just want to come in if I can. That was really interesting. I'm just wondering to what extent, thinking about Debord, maybe not so much Jung, but to what extent you would say that normal experience that isn't randomized and generally our normal kind of lived experience is closed to these kind of coincidences or these kind of more intense experiences. Do we live in a situation day to day that is somehow blocked, and is this experience of using Raundonautica, but of generally having a genuinely random experience, is that unblocking something?
Yes, you're definitely leaving your normal frame of reality. You have a frame of reference of reality that includes what you do in your normal routine. And you go out of that, the hope is that you get a more holistic view of holistic reality. And so your vantage point is higher, and so you can kind of see more of actual reality. And so that there's like not even just causality beyond that frame of reference, but possibilities beyond that frame of reference. And so it's not just things you could know, but things you could actually do outside of your normal frame of reference. And so that's what all randonauting is about, is getting a more holistic view of holistic reality.
But then I suppose also with Jung, as well as Debord, there's this kind of sensation, and you get it with many thinkers, also Theodore Adorno and Benjamin, this kind of feeling that there's some things that aren't possible because of the structure of society. Could be because it's capitalist, could be because it's totalitarian. Would you go along with that at all?
Yeah, that sort of goes along with our philosophy of noveltism, which is basically like science can explain things from a logical presupposition. And so like you prove something and then it logically follows that, you make that observation and you can observe something from there. Whereas we're saying that there's things that are valid that you can explore that have no logical presupposition, and that you can only literally get through there through maybe absurdity and through randomness, and that you can experience more of holistic reality through using randomness. So we're not saying that science is bad, but we're saying that it's only going to take you to these certain avenues and through certain channels. And they usually congregate in smaller and smaller groups of people who have acquired this knowledge. And so it's really hard to kind of break into those streams of knowledge without getting there, yourself, without getting there through this sort of divine inspiration or epiphanies or something that leads you there that has no logical presupposition, really. Like you just got there through randomness.
Okay, well, I want to just go back to this idea or this fact that there are a number of people using the app, maybe quite young people, but I guess you would expect them to be young because young people are into apps, but that kind of they emphasize this kind of scary aspect, and you're saying that there's this kind of element of fear always when you're going into an unknown place, and then a lot of these experiences of coincidence, of maybe like some kind of like spiritual realizations perhaps are blocked in a kind of rationalist capitalist society. You didn't say capitalist, but I just said that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to what extent is there fear because they're not really prepared, and then somehow it's helping them?
It's such a challenging worldview to say. We grow up and we go, your mind is distinctly separate from matter, and so we are putting this assertion forward that our minds are not separate from matter. Our minds can influence matter. And so just that is such a challenging worldview change that I think people get immediately paranoid and they go, no, there must be something else going on. There must be, a team of, hackers messing with people, or like it gets really out there. But it seems like this, like, I think you're exactly right. Is like there's some unconscious block. And this is what's really interesting to me, is because we put all of this information out there, like what we're actually doing. And then this sort of legend started to form about how it's creepy and a dark web. And it really is people's unconscious fears coming out. And like, it's interesting to me how what is occulted sort of maintains its own boundaries, and that we put all the information out there, but people are not ready to accept it, like you said, or like it's such a challenging worldview that they just assume something else, like that there must be a catch to it or something. And so like we didn't try to make it a cult, but there's now like a bifurcation in the community where there's people who go out for meaningful experiences to maybe have this weird mind-bending experience where they find something meaningful. And then there's also people who are seeking a thrill, which is not what we necessarily made it for, but obviously it's a valid use case because going somewhere unknown is sort of thrill-seeking behavior, I guess, and it is kind of creepy. So there's like a bifurcation in the community, and it's like created this esoteric side of Randonautica where there's people who go, oh, Randonautica, you're gonna get stalked, you're gonna get axe murderer in the woods coming to kill you, and then that's the exoteric view. And then there's people on the inside going, no, you're probably just gonna like see a little synchronicity, like maybe see your name on a piece of paper somewhere, or something weird like that.
But overall, it's gone pretty well now. I mean, you set up last year. There was this. Well, there's been these various COVID lockdowns, so that's not helping, And that, you could have thought, well, that's kind of really screwed up what we're trying to do. But somehow it's really taken off, partly, I guess, because people come out of COVID at various points and they want to go outside, and this app kind of leads them outside. But then you've had these controversies, and that, could be bad for some apps, but that's not, really damaging to you. I mean,
no, I mean, I'm quoted. This is like on my Wikipedia page. When they found the dead body in Alki Beach in Seattle, they quoted me as saying, "I wish I found it," because that's just kind of who I am. It is interesting to me. I mean, like, there's this idea that, like, if something bad happens, then it must all be bad, and it's just like we're not really interested in people who can't think abstractly. Like, they're just kind of excluded from what we're doing. So, like, it's like, okay, they found a dead body, therefore everything else about it must be bad. It's like, well, if you can't really accept that, the world is good and bad, and you're going to find both out there when you're exploring, we're not really interested. You just kind of get excluded.
Yeah, and so you could say that Randonautica allowed those people to find the body, but it didn't kill the person, So
right,
there's not really, the badness isn't connected
helped.
there.
It helped. It helped, and like there was another. This one didn't get as much coverage, but I think it was even crazier. Is this young girl? She's like 18 or something. Went out looking for death, and what she found was a guy who got shot, and she had to call the cops. And she's like crying in the TikTok video, and I actually confirmed this with news sources. She actually called the cops, and the guy got medical attention because she went looking for death and found somebody who got shot. To me, that one's like even crazier than the dead body one. It's like, you went looking for death and found somebody who got shot. Like, that's crazy.
And she saved his life, I would imagine.
Yeah. That's amazing to me. So yeah, the idea that we're like, it's just like these existential detectives going around solving crimes is very interesting to me and very cool. But like that, it's not for the, what we call these like creepy, we call it despair meme. This idea that there's this axe murderer waiting for you in the woods at this random point. We call it despair meme. And basically the whole project is about conquering despair. Like, that's one of the priorities of the project in general, is just like to get people over despair, because that keeps you in this probability tunnel. It keeps you in this lane or this reality where you're afraid to go somewhere you've never been because you think there's an axe murderer or something there. Like, so one of the ways to combat despair is through courage. And I think like the real randonauts are very courageous, because they go somewhere not knowing what's going to happen, but they face that fear and they go find out and see what's there.
Wonderful. I could see that. I mean, it is definitely, it can be intimidating to go somewhere where you haven't been, especially if you're walking around or something like that. And and it's not to say that you're encouraging people to be unsafe in any means. There's, advice all over the app, over the website, over all the press releases I've seen y'all put out. It's like, be safe if you can, travel with some people. Don't go into, don't trespass.
No, trespassing is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. It is kind of a shame that some of that press coverage has been negative, but I'm sure it draws people to it at the same time.
Yeah, it does. It does. And yeah, we really are. And that's what is amazing, is they're like, you're asking me to practice responsibility? Like, it's crazy. Like, I guess if you put something in front of millions and millions of people, they're gonna use it in a way you did not intend. I never intended for people to be breaking into houses looking for ghosts. But I've had quite a few angry emails about that just happening. So, we had the Federal Railroad Commission get on our asses about people trespassing on railroad sites, which is very dangerous. So yeah, we really went out of our way to go, look, do not trespass, practice situational awareness, try not to go out at night. Like, if you go out at night, it is spooky. It is creepy going somewhere you've never been at night. Like, and then people are surprised when they get scared or like they start trespassing and someone hits their car with a flashlight because they're on their private land. It's like, well, that's what happens.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of that. That's kind of common sense stuff. Like, and also, if you even have the slightest belief that your experience could be influenced by your intentions, and you set an intention that is knowingly a negative intention, then you can't be upset that something, upsetting happens to you.
Yeah, I don't get it, but I personally never went out looking for death or danger or anything like that. Like, it just wasn't what it was for. But
Yeah.
Generation Z is just, I mean, that was what was so interesting, is that we're in a global lockdown during a pandemic, and what does the collective unconscious express but death and danger and despair? I mean, it's all too fitting, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a
but
bit of a
also wouldn't
feedback
that be?
loop.
Yeah, and I think that could have happened with any generation. But yeah, you're right. With young people, maybe would be inclined to do that, and I think also in any moment, not just lockdown, but then lockdown obviously has its toll on people. But do you think that young people just aren't really ready sometimes? And this could be generational, or it could be like epochal, or rather, it's something to do with our times. That a lot of people just are going to not use it probably in the best way. Is there any kind of idea about maybe guiding people? Have you thought of doing tours or how to use this app type things?
We have a pilot for a TV show we shot, which some really interesting stuff has happened. And so we're hoping that we can get a more centralized resource of showing people how to actually use it, and showing kind of the mystical, weird things that can happen. Because I think a lot of people are looking for an actual portal or an actual goblin, when the effects are very much more subtle. But that doesn't mean that they're not present, and they're very interesting. So we're really interested in putting out a more centralized resource or guide. We have what we call the 9 tenets of randonauting. And it kind of goes into valuing an inner life and sincerity and picking up garbage and leaving somewhere better than when you found it. So we've tried to do that, but it's exactly what it is we gave people an avenue for manifestation without giving them wisdom first. It's just kind of what happens.
Interesting. Yeah. It was something we came about when we were speaking together, me and Adam, and we just thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if they did tours? But also just came about with this this idea that the kids maybe are not ready, or people in general. It's certainly not an issue with the app.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that was the whole thing, was we were trying to Trojan horse an inner life into middle America, and to get people to start going, okay, what is happening inside is matched outside. And we have had, I mean, every day. So this is why I'm not mad about all the creepy stuff and stuff. Every day I have someone messaging me going, I used your app once and it changed my perspective on things. Every day. So that's what keeps us going, is it actually does change people's view.
Yeah, and like you were saying, that the world is both good and bad. Every day, if you're looking and paying attention, you will see something unbelievably beautiful and unbelievably disgusting or horrifying. Right. My wife a couple days ago just went to move her car, because it's on time parking and stuff, while she was working. And as she was walking back to work, and this is in a populated downtown area, she came across a man completely unconscious and not breathing, laying face down in mud. And that's just while at work. So it's already out there. Right. I did want to ask you a little bit. Now, I don't know your politics, and we're not trying to push politics on you, because but this is the Acid Left podcast, right, and Twitch. We take that kind of view. And I noticed your Twitter handle was Quantum Comrade. Yeah. So there might be something there. What I was wondering is, something we've talked about in a couple different ways is the way digital technology affects us, and especially the way mapping technology, Google, Yelp, these review sites are kind of putting us into routines already, and I thought that this was a really interesting way that you could kind of use that to break out of those, because even when we travel somewhere for novelty, we're still using the maps and the recommended restaurants and stop areas along the way, just like we build social media filter bubbles where our opinions are kind of thrown back at us. Google and stuff is already determining what is popular and what's worthy of seeing. So do you
Yep.
see like this is especially important now because of the rise of this kind of stuff? And do you want to incorporate it in any way to something larger with maps? I think I saw that there was a project that was trying to like put Randonautic stories in maps.
Yeah. Well, okay. So yes, I do think that breaking out of filter bubbles is like really interesting, and that we could do a lot of really cool stuff on like a social media site based on novelty and randomness. I think that could be really, really cool. I want to address the political part of my moniker Comrade. It was not a political choice necessarily. It was really more tongue in cheek because I am sort of a capitalist and I wanted to sell, Randonautica, and I thought it would be funny to call myself Comrade. But the reason I chose the name Comrade really was because I'm not a guru, and I'm not like someone to tell you like what your synchronicities mean or like what it all means. Like, I'm just here to introduce the mystery, and I'm just another randonaut like viewing the mystery myself. So that's why I chose the name Comrade, is just because I'm not trying to be some like guru or something. I'm just like
not a master, but
can I just ask that?
Right.
Can I just ask what is the system of monetization on the app? Is there one?
Yes. So we have a pro subscription. We're using a freemium model where you get a certain amount of random points per day. You get as many pseudo random points as possible because we can generate pseudo randomness on your phone, and it's very low cost. But running the algorithm and running all those server calls have an inherent cost. So we have to limit that because we have like 16 million people using the app, and we got like a $6,000 server bill, and it almost tanked us. So we took like 2 months and like redid everything. And so right now it's a freemium model. You can go randonauting for free for a certain amount. I forget what it is right now, but you can go a certain amount every day. And then we have the ability to buy more points or become a Randonautica Pro subscriber where you get unlimited points. So for like $6 a month, you can go randonauting all you want. We have not taken venture capital. We had a couple offers, but I will dig my heels into the dirt before I ever do that, just because the first thing they're asking is like, how are we going to make this app more addictive? And like, I'm just not interested in that. Like, I'm interested in making things more connected and more, synchronous, and I'm just really not interested. So we're bootstrapping. We're a tiny little company that, we pay our developers every month, hopefully, but we really have more features planned, and there's a lot more cool stuff we can do. And so we're looking at selling more upgraded features within the app that require better hardware and more development time and stuff like that.
Yeah, those 16 million users, over what period is that? Or rather, how many are returning and how many are using it daily?
We've got probably like 1 million people that really use the app, like a lot. Like, yeah, probably about 1 million right now. This is our off period. During the spring, it usually blows up.
Sure, that makes sense. It's cold right now. It's harder to travel. Yeah. And you get like 30 rando like points basically.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I found that I couldn't use all of my free points in one day, because maybe it's because I was setting wide radiuses and stuff. But it took it was a whole day I did it, and it was really a fun experience. So it's not like you get nothing from the free version. It's very very worthy of trying out.
We want people to be able to use it. Like, we want everyone to be able to randonaut no matter what, but we also have to pay the server bills. So there's options to pay, but you should be able to randonaut all you want for free, hopefully.
Yeah, at least a couple times a day. If you want. Actually, maybe if you wouldn't mind going through some of the like the different points that you can select and what those mean, like the attractor, the blind spot, the void.
Absolutely. So we use pseudo randomness to search for blind spots, because when you're looking for blind spots, you don't want to influence it with your mind. You want to be able to be taken to places that you wouldn't think of going. So pseudo randomness can take you to places you never would have known existed or never would have thought of going. Now, the attractor, the void, and the anomaly, those all have to do with our mind-machine interaction algorithm. So the attractor is what I was talking about, where it measures a dense cluster of points. And wherever that clusters to a statistically improbable degree, we hypothesize it's been influenced by consciousness. A void is just the opposite. It's an anomalous empty space in the distribution of randomness. And an anomaly picks either attractor or void, whichever is the strongest of the two. So whichever is more statistically improbable, the anomaly. So I usually go with anomaly because it just picks the most statistically improbable point that is available. And then we're going to do some cool things, like right now, basically we're taking a snapshot in time of a random distribution of points. And it's like right then. But if you actually measure these throughout time, the cluster of random points move around like a heat map or like a meteorological map. And so once we get our new hardware going and stuff, we're going to be able to trace these anomalies throughout time and space. So right now it's like you measure the anomaly and then you go there. But in the future, you'll be able to actually go to an anomaly while it is occurring. So there may be some like temporal aspect that we're not, doing right now, we're missing out on. So we're going to be doing time and space. And then another thing we're going to do is introduce this fortune cookie idea, where you get a random point, and then you also get this random bunch of words that could have some like meaning possibly. We're going to see what happens. But there's been a few services that did this where they would randomly send you like a random grouping of words, and people were having really spooky effects. There's this thing called sync text. It's no longer operative, but it used to be called sync text, where they would just send you random words, and like it was like a weird fortune cookie kind of thing. And people would get really like, someone told me yesterday a really funny story about it. It was like he had a hot date with a girl, and right as they started making out, sync text sent in the message that said, "Wear a condom." And so that's like what we want to put in the app.
Wow, I like that. That's interesting, because I was thinking like maybe I know like a random word generator to set my intention sometime. So like to really even randomize that even stronger.
Yes, that's been suggested before. Yeah, that's something we're definitely going to do.
Cool. This kind of makes me think, do you see this in relation at all to like meme magic or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, the whole project has a very like strong mimetic base. Actually, you can Google, it's called infernography, like infonography. There should be a link. If you Google it, you should be able to find it. It's actually a mimetics handbook made by the creators of Fatum that goes into the despair meme and the void meme, and actually has schematics for how these things work. So yes, there's a very, very strong mimetic component to Randonautica, and a lot of how like the synchronicities synchronicity is supposed to be such a personal thing. But what we found was when millions of people are doing it around the globe, they actually have shared experiences. And a lot of these kind of legends start to snowball and form because of the mimetics. So there's actually a large mimetic component. And yeah, I think the meme magic, like of a bunch of people focusing on some emblem can definitely change material reality in some way.
And couldn't that like obviously then be used for some kind of positive end, like peace or something?
I believe so. I do believe so. Like, yeah, I think so. I think if we all focused on heaven on earth, it would get a lot better.
Yeah. Another thing is there's this book called Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher. You may know it. We've been reading it recently. And there's a quote in there, and I have to paraphrase, but he says, imagine what would happen if you organized a protest and everyone showed up. So, I suppose that would be really good. But then also, I don't know, it could kind of go really bad. But I want to kind of like change it a bit. Imagine if you organize a protest and everyone showed up and started randonauting.
Yeah.
Or
I've definitely had that thought.
I've definitely had that
thought. Yeah, like a spontaneous protest all the way across the world within blind spots, and then, you'd start protesting to people that you never would have never seen it, and that could be super interesting.
Yeah, or just if everyone randonauted. But I mean, if everyone randonauted, that's a lot of people having random experiences. So that's going to change, everything. I mean, even if
we've always been very careful to keep politics out, because we're trying to create a global mythology and a global mythos based around curiosity. And so it is very difficult negotiating, especially since we've gone international. On July 4th of 2019, we went international and we blew up in Russia and Mexico on the same day. And then all of a sudden we had more Spanish speaking randonauts than we had English speaking randonauts. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. It's like very interesting because like our number one randonauting city right now is Poland. And so we've got people from all these different backgrounds and all these different political and religious, and it's very difficult trying to keep a communal space while you still allow like politics and stuff to be discussed. So like we try to keep things like just focused on curiosity, and that's like the main ideology behind Randonautica.
For sure, yeah. But I'm thinking like if many people all had random experiences, that means meeting new people, doing different things. It would probably improve a lot of people's lives. So it would have a positive effect overall. I mean, like there's also that kind of what do you call it, like kind of a trope, or I don't know how you call it. I guess it's kind of a meme. But what if all 1 billion Chinese people jumped up and down at once?
Yeah,
you'd
right.
You'd have a tidal wave. What if they all use Randonautica? But just if a lot of people use it, then surely that would. If a lot of randomness happened at the same time to a lot of people, then that's bound to change something. Because a lot of it is. Yeah, a lot of it, a lot of the problem is people were very fixed in their routine. Yeah. They go to university, they go home, they go to work, and they're not breaking out of that. Maybe they then get stuck in bad relationships. If the amount of people you possibly can meet is greatly open, then you open yourself up to experience. It's got to be good.
Just the trajectory of people's thoughts would shift from what they were deterministically thinking, and then you inject a bunch of randomness. And so and I think that's kind of what's happening is like we're opening new avenues for epiphanies and inspiration. And that's really like, we really think that novelty is a treasure, and that's why we're doing this.
I think novelty is a treasure, and it becomes hard. I think it's just, we have increasingly felt that novelty is harder to come by. So that's why we really appreciate something like this that is focused on novelty and curiosity. It has what we would call like an acid component to it by eroding previous structures that, we've built up throughout our lifetime.
Yeah, it's boundary breaking. It has a lot to do with psychedelia, actually. It is mind manifesting. It's boundary breaking. It's threshold breaking. It is a lot like psychedelia.
Yeah, but at the same time, it also builds new roads. Because once you go to somewhere new, it becomes part of your reality tunnel. You incorporate it into your picture, like you were saying. This, you said, holistic view of reality.
Yeah, and that's what we call the genesis field. So once you leave the stasis field or the complex web of causal events that you are locked into, you open up new opportunities and new possibilities. That's what we call the genesis field, where it's a new probability field where you have new potential choices and new possibilities.
Yeah, someone's just saying in comments, they're called Wise Old Bird, and they say, if you keep out politics, you implicitly enforce the status quo. And then they say, because people think that's normal, and then progressive ideas are political. I think it's enough just to say, if you keep out politics, you implicitly enforce the status quo. I mean, I kind of agree to some extent, but I think more politics is happening. It's not like politics will stop happening because Randonautica, they don't want to endorse a particular political side. There's still politics in the world.
Well, no, we definitely have an ideological perspective for sure, and we are de facto political in a way. But I would rather not do any kind of self-effacing actions by jumping into the stasis of all these other political regimes and movements that I believe are self-effacing and shooting yourself in the foot. So I do think we are political, but I would rather keep out of that sphere entirely.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of conversations with leftists, and we are left, and we define as that. I don't really define as any more precisely than that, but I'm definitely left of Biden, if that helps. But I mean, I was fully supporting Corbyn in the UK election, but we often get the same talks again and again, and like there's not many ideas coming out. That's why we were kind of super happy to see someone kind of playing with Jung or incorporating Jung. Also, because it's hard for us to find anyone who speaks well of Jung in our circles. Because there's a whole kind of element of changing things positively in society that requires that people are healthy, and I think people are ignoring their own kind of personal imagery, and they're not construing their own kind of narratives. So I think that is a good thing, and it can be political. It can fit in to a political framework.
Yeah, if you want it to, and if you do it, it's going to change. Hopefully, it's like any change in your perception of reality will affect any one person's politics. In that same regard, especially if you want to think about it in broader terms, which is actually, I think, what you're saying, Joshua, is outside of like party politics and stuff like that. You're thinking of the way people interact with the world, how they interact with their neighbors, their city, and stuff like that. And that you might not want to call it political. It has social implications that are deep.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, I sure as hell did not vote for Trump. So
yeah. No, but that's the thing.
If we had a Trump supporter on and didn't like really criticize them for it, I don't know what we would do.
Right.
I don't know what we'd be, and if you turned out to be like aligned with, some alt-right people or Trumpians.
There is a lot, because we are ARG. Randonautica pulls on a lot of ARG, and right now that is being misused entirely by the QAnon movement. And so one of my buddies, Joseph Matheny, who created ARG, he is coming out a lot to speak out about how QAnon is fucked up, and they're taking these grassroots storytelling platforms and basically weaponizing them against the people. So there definitely is a political element there.
I've listened to several interviews with him, and that's I really appreciate his perspective. I never played his game. What was it called?
Ong's Hat.
Yeah, Ong's Hat. But I've read a lot about it. It's a little bit before I was actually using the internet and stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Ong's Hat seems like an amazing project, and I really have appreciated a lot of his media appearances and his explanations of ARG. It's really nice. We talked about some of the stories seeming somewhat fabricated before. And to me, it seems kind of easy if I'm watching YouTube videos or TikToks of that to point out. But do you have a feeling about that? Because it seems like some people are almost taking Randonautica to make their own performance art, create almost like an ARG in their own mythos that doesn't necessarily use their actual randonauting experience, but kind of situating a fiction within the world.
It blows my mind, because I will look at these videos and I'm like, I think they're pretty funny. I'm entertained. And then the comments are like, you need to call the cops on these people. And it's like, people actually believe it, and they can't see that it's not real. And so that's where this whole hyper reality mind fuck starts happening, where I'm just like, I don't know what to do about it. It's kind of crazy. But the problem I have is that we want to encourage people to explore the world, and then you have people putting out videos like, oh, I'm getting stalked because I use Randonautica, don't use it. And the people are ending up being afraid to leave their house because of what they're putting forth in these videos. So we have a lot of work to be done as far as kind of exposing these, and I kind of just want to make it into a big joke. I think that's going to be my angle this year, is to just kind of make some of these fake videos into a joke. And really, if you can't tell that those videos are fake, you probably shouldn't be randonauting. It's probably just not for you.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny too, because there's like, you know, going back to the Dérive and stuff, there's little games. There's like a lot of different ways you can do the Dérive, especially like, you know, that Debord and other Situationist kind of added things to it as time went on. So it developed out of its original purpose. And there's like little games you can play to kind of, you know, get yourself somewhere out of the ordinary. And one of them is something like go to a crowded place, pick a person in a red hat and follow them. So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, that's almost encouraging you to stalk people. So
Right. Yeah. So there, I mean, I do think it's interesting, and I encourage people to make art and, you know, express themselves. But I do think that a lot of these horrific thriller are kind of just exploiting people, especially like really gullible people. And so I do kind of have a problem with that. Just it seems a little exploitative to me. And we want to encourage people to go out and explore, not tell them there's an axe murderer waiting for you in the woods wherever you go, because it's not true. Like, it's really not true. Like, and if you can't walk down the street, you need to like let everybody know. Like, we need to know that that's going on, because like some people are literally afraid to walk down the street without getting the cops called on them or something. Like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a problem. You know, it's just a thing we're dealing with. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, in terms of like people not knowing what's true and what's not true, and then just inventing shit and thinking that's true. I mean,
it's a little scary.
I mean, I think this kind of like banning Trump from Twitter is like, okay, that's something that might help, but it's not a long-term solution. It's obviously going to cause a whole lot of other problems.
It's really scary. Yeah, this whole real and fake, like what is real and what is fake, and then I mean, it's the Baudrillard hyper reality. It's really crazy.
Yeah. Have you banned anyone from playing Randonautica?
I don't think so. Like, we should. Yeah. Like, if we like if we found out that somebody was trespassing or something, then we probably would ban them if we could. But it's kind of hard to. I get somebody tweeting like, somebody was on my lawn, and I'm like, well, did you tell them to get off your lawn or something? Yeah. You know, it's like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, but at that point, it's almost like that's, you know, that was that person's decision to do that. Anyone could go on any abandoned property or trespass on anyone's lawn or whatever at any time. You know,
yeah,
it
is very weird though, but it goes to show that people are using these applications and that they just see the responsibility not on them. They see it on the application. So like anything that they're given, it's really scary. Like this idea that they must be personally responsible is like so out there to them. It's like, it's been very eye-opening to me, like as far as what people can discern and what people can take responsibility for themselves. It's been very eye-opening.
Sure, yeah. I guess we can kind of like maybe kind of try and summarize, or maybe say something. Maybe if you have like something new coming up or something you just want us to know, like any kind of closing thoughts you have about the app.
Well, I have a book coming out this spring. It should be out this spring, called The Guide to Raundonautica. And that should be really, really cool, fun book. It goes into a lot of experiences and a lot of the science behind it and a lot of the history of parapsychological research. And so look out for that. It's going to be really cool. Ready or Randonaut, like I said, the TV show, look out for that, because that should be coming out sometime, maybe this spring, hopefully. Look out for that. And then we have a whole new section in the app that's going to come out. It's called a lab, and we're going to be doing stuff like retrocausal anomalies, which like, it's like the randomness has already been generated, and it's like you influenced it. When you influence it, it influences it in the past. And so we're going to be testing if you can retrocausally influence the randomness, because theoretically you should be able to, if we generate a bunch of randomness and store it in a file, as long as it's the first time it's being observed, technically, even if we generated it 2 weeks ago and you generate an anomaly next Tuesday, it should be still able to be influenced by your mind throughout time and space. So that's going to be something really interesting that we're going to be testing that I'm really excited about. Like I said,
so you're then changing the past, or how is this working? How would that work?
Yeah, it's retrocausal. The theory is that you influencing randomness, like you could influence it today, and even though if it was generated 2 weeks ago, it could still be influenced by your intention.
If it hadn't been observed.
If it has not, if it's the first time it's been observed. So like that's the theory anyway, but we're interested in testing that. There's a lot of evidence pointing towards that the effects are retrocausal and that you can influence randomness 2 weeks ago with your intention today. It's kind of crazy, but that's what we're interested in. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, very interesting conversation. I very much appreciate it. And I'm personally going to do some more randonauting. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I would say, like, if anyone wants to try it, I would go with the anomaly option, and I would try at least 3 points in a row. Like, that's the general rule of thumb, is to try 3 points. Like the Dérive, they would do it all day long. So, like, if you go out and you didn't see anything one time, like, keep going. Like, keep going. It kind of gets a while for your brain to kind of like get into this state of noticing like interesting, weird things, and like just start paying attention. Just start paying attention. That's all I got to say.
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's been great, brilliant. There'll be so much more we could talk about, but we can't right now. And
yeah,
I will start using the app soon. And
all right.
Yeah, just a brilliant idea. And yeah, cheers.
Thanks, guys. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was Joshua from Randonautica, and we've had a great conversation, and I think we will end the broadcast for today because that's what we're here for. This will be on YouTube very soon. It will also be here still, and we have a reading group coming up on Ghost of My Life by Mark Fisher, continuing our Mark Fisher reading group series, and we have lots more things coming up in these weeks. So please just keep an eye out on our Instagram, our Facebook, YouTube, and we have a Patreon. So until next time.
Thanks everyone for coming out.
Bye-bye.